Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
My name is Charles Knuth. I was drafted. I immediately began basic training, which lasted 17 weeks at that time. That was a long period of training. And the training was at Camp Landing down in Florida, where I finished those 17 weeks. After I well, I'll tell you how it came about that I completed my basic training. I was in a tent with a companion. There were two of us in a tent. I was in with a boy from Ashtabula, Ohio, and he was a farm boy. And the two of us were in that tent when the first sergeant came along, and he crawled into the tent and he hit me across the soles of my feet with his stick, and he said, "Get your kit together. You're getting to the Army Specialized Training Program." My first stop was at Ohio State University, where I sat in on chemical engineering lectures. And that was a screening point before I entered the atom bomb project, in which they were testing to see what needs they had for specialized knowledge or aptitude. And one of those was the atom bomb project was probably drawing more people than any of the other secret projects. When I entered the project, the first thing I learned was that we were more secret than anything else in service. Initially, the idea was that you were going to be told nothing except what you absolutely had to know in order to operate. However, most of us had contacts immediately from college. I was 1 hour on the project, and I ran into men that I had known from college. And they said, "Come over here and I'll tell you what it's all about." And that's how I learned what was going to happen. The point was that we had to refine both plutonium and uranium in order to bring them to useful concentration for explosives purposes. What the target was a degree of explosive power that would be far beyond anything known before. I was sent first to Oak Ridge briefly in Tennessee, and in order that my references could be double-checked before I could go any closer to the beginning of the whole assignment. Then I went to Los Alamos in New Mexico on the what they call the Pajarita Plateau, 7,500 feet elevation. Los Alamos was the most secretive of all. We had restricted uniforms. We just were labeled service forces. We had no specialized designation because we were essentially melting into the background. People, for example, could go into town but they were not recognizable as anything other than the run-of-the-mill of service people. In the early testing, what we had before us were two possibilities. One was what we called the little boy, and the other was the fat man. And they were quite different in their construction. The fat man was a plutonium bomb in which the bomb literally, and I held it in my hands, it was like a grapefruit. It had the dimensions of a grapefruit. And it was detonated such that the casing would implode and put pressure on the central explosive, which would then evaporate everything. The little boy was different. It was like a revolver that fired a bullet into a target, and in that action it creates the impact that detonated the bomb. The first bomb tested was the little boy, and it was done in New Mexico on the open prairie, and as it's well known, it was a 100-foot high steel tower with the bomb at the top. When the explosive was detonated, first of all, the concussion was felt for 200 miles, and the steel tower, 100 feet high, disappeared. It was like gas. The distance that was safe for testing was certainly calculated at great care, and with and such that you were shielded from the impact. The dangers of radiation were serious and well documented and explained to us, so we were aware of this. And indeed, I know of a man who lost his life in an experiment. So whether there were others, I don't know, but it was a dangerous game. It happened that after the first bomb was detonated, and as I said, it was the little boy, that the Japanese did not surrender, of course. And so I believe that we waited 3 days before dropping a second bomb, which was the Fat Man, on Nagasaki in Japan, and that immediately, almost instantly, led to Japan's surrender. My feeling is, and I've heard this from other people as well, that the bomb shortened the war, saved many lives, but many people feel that it was not a moral thing to do. The extent of the danger and of the destruction and the loss of life was so great, it was unprecedented. And many people seriously felt they were sorry they had a part in it.
My name is Lawrence Kaplan. I went to Fort Jackson in South Carolina for basic training. And then after a while, they set up a program in the Army called the Army Specialized Training Program. They sent me to Lafayette College in Eastern Pennsylvania. I was assigned to the Spanish program. I had to learn to speak Spanish fluently. When that program broke up at the end of about 6 months, they needed troops at the front. I was selected to go into military intelligence training in Camp Ritchie, Maryland. After I finished military training, they decided to select me to send me to London, in England, to study under British intelligence. My specialty in military intelligence were photo interpretation. In other words, planes would fly over the enemy territory, take pictures of the ground, and turn those pictures over to us to study, to evaluate, and to plot on maps any concentrations of troops, of guns, of personnel, of any kind of military information that we could use that would be helpful to us so that we don't get trapped. We know exactly what's in front of us. Well, from England, we finally got instructions to move into Normandy. And so we moved from Batsford, central England, down to Southampton. We got on LSTs and we moved across the English Channel into Normandy at Utah Beach. You can't land tanks on D-Day. You can't land tanks in water. You have to have a dry surface. And so we had to wait until there was a bridgehead in Normandy. So we didn't get in until about 18 days after D-Day. My division made the breakthrough in Marseille, and our goal was to get to Brest, which is at the tip point of the Brittany Peninsula. And there, of course, that was a very important submarine base that the Germans had. And we had to do everything in our power to destroy that base because that's where their submarines nested. And so we headed out. We broke through the lines. We broke through every German force that they could put in our way. And we did succeed in getting to Brest. The German army, on the other hand, had instructions that if we broke through their lines, they are to regroup and follow us to Brest and put up a last-ditch fight at Brest to protect their submarine base. And so when we got to Brest and we camped, we realized that we were surrounded by the German army. We were in deep trouble. But thank God, we looked up at the sky one morning and there came the Air Force planes. And they bombed the hell out of the German troops which surrounded us. We broke a hole through their lines. We captured hundreds of Nazi prisoners. We killed several hundred Nazis. We captured the general of the German forces in Brittany. And it was a complete success. We were down in central France when we got notice on December 24th, the day before Christmas, that we had to drive all night to get to Bastogne to relieve the 101st Airborne Division, which was trapped in Bastogne. It was not only my division. I don't want you to think that we won the war alone. You don't win a war by yourself. There were other tank divisions as well as ours which were called into action. The 4th Armored Division, the 6th Armored, which is my division, and about at least half a dozen more tank divisions, infantry troops, engineers, signal people. All of these people together managed to break through and free the 101st Airborne in the Battle of Ardennes. I want you also to know that it was the 6th Armored Division that liberated the Buchenwald concentration camp, which is near Weimar in Germany. What the scene that we found there was horrifying. I mean, people were dying of disease, of starvation. It was the smell. They didn't have time to bury the bodies. They were dying so rapidly. It is estimated that 58,000 Jewish people and others were killed in Buchenwald. And we liberated the camp. As soon as we got into the camp, it was our medics. And thank God, they're a wonderful lot. They picked up all of the still living, still breathing, and put them on cots and transported them to military hospitals for development, for nurturing, for giving them food and drink and bringing them back to life. And we accomplished that miraculously. It was a wonderful achievement. I went through Buchenwald, you know, myself. The people don't believe what they did there to the people. I mean, they just put them into these ovens and burned them, burned the bodies. The stench must have been terrific in the whole area. But we did indeed liberate Buchenwald, and that was our greatest achievement. It occurred on April 11th, 1945, April 11th. And we did liberate the Buchenwald concentration camp. We pulled out every living soul that we could. And we put in, the Germans had already left, they shed their uniforms. They all became German peasants working farms. They were fighting for their lives too. War is hell. People, countries should avoid war at any expense, because the loss and the dangers to life and limb of young people is so severe that it leaves a lifelong impression, and that's bad. So I would say to the younger generation, avoid war at any cost.
Bert Grosselfinger. I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Coast Artillery Reserve, and that was in June of 1938, when I was called to active duty on Bastille Day, July 14th, 1941. I was called into the Signal Corps because the Signal Corps was the branch that was expanding the most at that time. And even though I was in the Coast Artillery, since I was an engineer, that made me eligible for the Signal Corps. So I reported to duty for my orders read to be released from active duty after 1 year. Well, after 5 months, Pearl Harbor happened, and my 1 year turned out to be 5.5, of which part of it was voluntary. I was in a signal battalion. In fact, it was the 51st, which was in continuous operation since its formation in 1917. It's still in formation now. It's overseas in Afghanistan. So I was a company officer, and well, we were transferred down to Camp Blanding in Florida. In May of '43, we got orders to go to New York, and we boarded a French ship, the Louis Pasteur, with a British crew, 5,000 American troops bound for Casablanca. But the first 2 days out of New York, we had air cover, which meant they were watching for U-boats. And the last 2 days before Casablanca, we had the same air cover. But the 3 days in the middle, of course, we were on our own. But we landed in Casablanca without any problems. Well, when we were in North Africa, one of our sergeants stepped on an anti-personnel mine on one of the pole lines we were rehabilitating. We never worked on it right away unless the engineers cleared it, but the engineers weren't 100% effective, and they missed this one. So he ended up in a British hospital, and we didn't expect to see him again. But to my amazement, 4 months later, he showed up. He was reassigned to the battalion, and the first thing he did was come to me and say, "I'm here because a surgeon he said he had made such a fuss at the British hospital because they intended to amputate his foot that they got rid of him. They sent him to an American hospital, where this surgeon put him in such condition I was back on duty. And he said, his name is the same as yours. And my name, Grosselfinger, was kind of unusual. So I concluded it was a cousin of mine who I had seen once in my life at my grandfather's farm in Long Island. Well, there we went east to Tunisia and finally came back to Mers el Kabir, which is the port of Oran, Algeria, on our way to Italy. Now, we landed in Naples. We were on our way ultimately to Rome, but there was really a stalemate at the Gustav line. That was about near Cassino, where things really bogged down. That was about 40 miles north of Naples. And there was an interesting experience there. We built these pole lines, you know, a pole line with a telephone pole, cross arms, glass insulators to which the copper wire was attached. Well, every interval we had a maintenance team to make repairs in case of a storm, a tree falling on the wire, vehicle hitting a pole, and so on. And these maintenance teams came out if there was a break,